Hey there everyone, I'm Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the MCU Perspectives, and today we're going to be looking at the second movie to be released as part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, The Incredible Hulk. And just like with Iron Man, I should probably discuss my personal history with the Hulk prior to seeing this movie. My first exposure to the Hulk was, believe it or not, the 2003 movie Hulk. At that point, I was a little hesitant on superheroes, but was kind of opening up more to heroes that were beyond the whole capes and flying kind. And mainly because of the Spider-Man trilogy. I saw them and I was open more to watching them. And when I started seeing ads for Hulk, I admittedly didn't think I thought it looked a little weird, but I got a children's book of it. I kind of thought it looked cool. So I figured I wanted to see it. So I saw it once so I got it on tape when I was a kid, and as a kid, I remember liking it. Objectively, I know it's not good. It's objectively not a good movie, but it's still one of those. But it's genuinely how I got introduced to the Hulk, and believe it or not, I like the premise of it. I love just even hearing the premise via the movie. I thought was cool. It's a scientist who gets exposed. Who is a scientist who turns into this big hulking monster every time he gets mad, and then when he can't control it, can't control what he's doing, and then when he turns back, he has no memory of it. I like that, just from a psychological aspect and just from a physical aspect. Seeing this giant monster just wrecking crap, it's fun. It's just a really, it's fun. I thought that was cool. Now again, objectively, the first one, the Hulk, the first movie, is not good. It is not a good movie objectively, but it's how I got introduced to the Hulk, so it kind of holds a place for me. But with that being said, though, my exposure to the Hulk after that was mostly through comics and cartoons. Just or like for example, I think my next major exposure to the Hulk was either Ultimate Avengers or a crossover between the Hulk and Power Pack, which is another Marvel comic, which is another Marvel team altogether. We may be getting a movie about them later, but short version, it's a group of kids who found these alien costumes that give them superpowers. But I was able to get to the Hulk, but I think the Ultimate Avengers was the next time I actually saw stuff about the Hulk. I probably had seen him cameo here and there in certain cartoons and so forth, but for the most part, but it was the Ultimate Avengers movies where I kind of got more exposure to him. Seeing this like seeing Bruce Banner as a background character in those films, him trying to gain control of the Hulk, seeing him transform. I actually legitimately thought it looked cool and interesting, and seeing more of it, I actually thought it was really nice. In fact, when I actually read the Hulk Power Pack stuff, I thought it was interesting. So then we get this movie. This movie, like when I first saw the trail, like because of how negative a response the first film got, when I learned about that, I didn't think they were gonna be making another movie myself. Like I didn't think they'd be making another Hulk movie, but we actually wound up getting one in the form of this. As the first trailer I saw of it was the one where Bruce Banner is running from the military and he's in a sec. Sorry, just had to recenter it a bit. The first trailer I saw of it was Bruce Banner running through a library and university as soldiers were tracking him down. When I first saw the trailers for this, I thought it was just like a spy thriller movie. That it was just there to it was just about a guy who knew something he wasn't supposed to, so he had to be silenced, and it's just him trying to run from the movie would be about him running from the military, so that he could try and survive. And I saw this, I thought it's just kind of going to be one of those movies, isn't it? I'm not going to want to watch it. And then they showed him transforming into the Hulk, and suddenly I was like, oh, that's what they're doing. And I was immediately sucked in. Like, seeing that just made me want to see the movie, because I thought it looked cool. It was cool. We were getting another Hulk movie. I thought I first thought it was a sequel, and it's kind of, sort of, not really a sequel. It kind of thinks you're aware of the story, but we'll get into that when I actually talk about it. But then after that, I was just amazed. I just wanted to see it, especially when I saw who the villain was. And again, thanks to that Hulk Power Pack comic I read, I was aware of what it was. I actually did know who the villain was, and I actually wanted to see, and I actually did want to see the Hulk and them clash. So I was interested in that. And and on top of that, the reveal that this was actually that this was connected to Iron Man was even better. Like just learning that, oh my god, they're actually going to be making more movies about this, and that they're all connected. I mean, like that was enough of a hook for me. Like I didn't think they were actually going to do it back then. Like like I said, I didn't know about the stuff with the Nick Fury scene in Iron Man until after I saw this movie. So to suddenly to have that confirmation, this one that they're probably going to be making more, or even hearing about it, I thought that was really cool. So yeah, did want to go. So yeah, it was definitely on my to see list of films. But how does it fit? But how does it fare now? Like, what do I think of this film as it is? Well, first let's talk about the story. Like I said it was kinda, sorta a sequel to the first Hulk movie, and it's like that in the case of, while Iron Man dealt with Tony Stark's origin about him developing the technology to become Iron Man and him ultimately deciding to use that technology to fix the mistakes that he unintentionally wrought. For Hulk, the origin is kept to like a short little montage in the beginning. As we see our main character Bruce Banner as he's testing out some kind of as he's in the middle of some kind of experiment. He's in a chair, and they're dousing him with, and they're pretty much and they're dousing him with, and as they're with a weird green light over him. We learn later that, like, I'll just give the backstory right now. What's going on in this section is that the military, or in this case Shield, they state it might be Shield, but like we hear the name Shield thrown out there, though whether this is Shield or not, I don't know. But in this case, the military is trying to develop a super soldier serum. I'll talk about that more when we get to Captain America, because that's kind of a problem, but because that's kind of a thing. But but the head of the department is General Thunderbolt Ross. They're looking into ways to try and essentially make their soldiers better, stronger, rather than giving them new weapons, as he says it. They instead make the person better. And one of those divisions is one that Bruce Banner and General Ross's daughter, Elizabeth Ross, or Betty, is in charge of. However, Bruce does not know about this. Instead, he's working on the division, but he's under the assumption that he's trying to find a way to he wants to be able to find a way to give people resistance to gamma radiation, which is what he's doing right now when the movie starts up. In this case, however, Bruce thought that what he was doing he was so sure about what he was doing, that what he was going to do would actually help people, that he decided that he would go under the knife, so to speak, that he would test it on himself, which is what we're seeing. This machine that he's hooked up to is supposed to be dousing him with gamma radiation to see if he can try and build up a resistance to it, but something goes wrong. Whatever happens, the gamma dosage is apparently goes too high, and so as Bruce is doused with gamma radiation, it transforms him into a monster, a big monster that in the montage all we see of is through its eyes as it breaks free from the experiment and just starts wrecking the lab, and in the process Betty and General Ross are injured. As such, the next thing we see about them is Bruce back to normal as Betty's now in the hospital. But as he goes to see her, General Ross comes up to Bruce, and they have a confrontation, which ends with Bruce walking out. But before Bruce goes anywhere, Ross tells a soldier to go after Bruce, and the montage just pretty much shows. It doesn't show it, but we see that for a while, Bruce is now on the run. Now, whatever Ross said to him, it's enough of a big deal that he's being chased all around the country, as we keep seeing flashes of news reports of these big monsters, of a monster attack somewhere, a big green Sasquatch somewhere in Canada or throughout the U.S. Pretty much, just no matter where they go, no matter where they go. Like, you see these incidents over the course as Ross keeps trying to track him down, and by the time we catch up to Bruce in the present day, it's been 5 years since Bruce doused himself with radiation. As at the moment he's living in Brazil. He's living in Brazil as just kind of a labor worker. He pretty much does odd jobs, so to speak, mostly in a factory that specializes in selling that bottles soda and ships it out to the rest of the world. All his jobs mostly consist of performing maintenance, delivering mail, just little odds and ends and so forth. As we see him trying to manage his anger to try and control the Hulk. However, one of the things that happened. However, one day while working in the factory, he's asked to, I think, fix a fuse box or something. It's one of those switches that controls a conveyor belt, as it apparently is short circuiting. And while Bruce is able to fix it, he ends up cutting himself, and some of his blood falls into a conveyor belt. And at that point, Bruce just starts freaking out and tells them how he wants him to stop it. And so Bruce goes down to where he thinks his blood dropped, and he sees one drop, and he sees the drop on the belt, and he's able to clean it off, and he thinks he's in the clear. But then the camera pans over, and we see that a bit of his blood got in one of the bottles. So, as we see the bottle get shipped out and gets sent to the U.S. In the meantime, though, as Bruce is going out for the day, he sees this guy. Like, he sees a co-worker hitting on a woman that also works there. He's just kind of the guy hitting on this lady is just kind of a creep as he's hitting on her, trying to seduce her, acting like he's cool when in reality he's just kind of a scumbag. And Bruce, at first, doesn't want to get into a confrontation because, again, Hulk. But eventually he does step in and try and get her away from him by saying, "Hey, do you want to get lunch? We'll get lunch." And when the guy tries telling Bruce to piss off, Bruce tries to say, "You don't make me angry," in Portuguese, because he's learning Portuguese. And all he says is, and he ends up just saying, "You don't make me hungry. You won't like me when I'm hungry," which does confuse the guy. But they do manage to avoid a confrontation because the boss is watching, so Bruce is able to get the woman away. But things continue to go wrong for Bruce as we cut to the U.S. with General Ross as he gets a soldier comes in and tells him that they've got an incident of gamma poisoning. As we see the Stan Lee cameo in this case, as Stan Lee opens up a fridge and opens up one of the sodas from the factory that Bruce works at, and it's apparently the one that Bruce's blood dropped into. And after he takes a sip, it's presumed that whatever happens to him, maybe he gets hospitalized. We don't know, but whatever the kick was that he got made him drop the bottle and maybe need to be hospital. Made him drop the bottle enough to report it. So I'm guessing maybe he was hospitalized. They don't say it for certain, but I'm guessing that's the implication. And so Ross immediately wants to know where the hell the bottle was made, and so he wants to get a battalion of troops there, because odds are if he got gamma sickness from this, he thinks that maybe Bruce is there. However, before he heads out, he calls in a favor from one of his buddies in the military, and which gives him a battalion of men. And one of the men that he gets him is a man by the name of hold on. I should have kept this on. Sorry, these shorts are not exactly fair, so to speak. He gets a soldier by the name of Emil Blonsky, who is apparently a Russian soldier who served a few years and has kind of gotten a reputation. And so he thinks that maybe this guy will be good enough he may be able to give Ross an edge that he needs to catch Bruce. But However, when Ross and his men out to try and find Bruce, as they're able to track him down to his apartment and figure out where he lives, Bruce's dog, because he has a dog, Bruce's dog starts reacting, and this gets Bruce awake, and he realizes that something's not right, and he immediately realizes he needs to get out of there. So, as such, before they can get a good look on him, Bruce gets dressed and grabs his stuff, and oh yeah, something I forgot to mention. There's something I need to mention, by the way. While Bruce is in Brazil, we see him experimenting on trying to find a cure for himself. In this case, because he has a computer with him, that has an encrypted line on it, which he uses to communicate with a man by the name of that. For now, we're just going to call Mr. Blue because that's what he's called on the computer. Mr. Blue and him have pretty much been exchanging notes, and pretty much uses the lifeline to try and find a cure for the Hulk. And from what we get, apparently they've been trying this out on several occasions. They've tried various other cures, and their latest cure is a flower, which they think that if they can condense it enough and expose that, which Bruce is able to cut off all the petals to, and tries to concoct what he thinks would be an antidote. Only when he tests the antidote on a sample of his blood, it only suppresses the gamma for a little bit before it causes it to just go nuts. As such, Bruce tells Mr. Blue that it's a failure and that the only way that he can get his help, and Mr. Blue says then the best thing we can do is meet, and of course Bruce doesn't want to do that because, again, people are after him, so he thinks it's too risky. So Mr. Blue instead says maybe he should send him a blood sample. As such, Bruce sent him a sample of his blood through the mail, and Mr. Blue says that with the experiments they had, it did get some significant gamma reduction, but he won't be able to get anything else without the needed data, and unfortunately, Bruce doesn't have that, as the only place that has that is home, as he says, which is pretty much back at his lab. So yeah, he's kind of hit a dead end, which again is where we cut back to this, as when the soldiers start knocking on Bruce's door, he grabs the computer and his bag and gets dressed and just tries running out while he leaves a bit of clothes and hat to throw off the military. In this case, as such, they burst in and they start trying to shoot the bed with tranks because General Ross ordered them to bring him in alive. But unfortunately, they realize that they've been had and they're gone. So after they silence the dog, which I'm assuming they hit it with a trank bullet, I don't know. Blonsky was the one that shot him, and we see later that he has live rounds, so maybe the dog is dead. I hope not, but whatever. After they silence the dog, they try and pursue Bruce, who actually did manage to sneak out the window into one of his neighbors' apartments. And so after he makes sure the military is off his trail, he sneaks out. But unfortunately, as he goes out there, Blonsky sees his face, and they all got a report about Bruce, and they all got a picture with Bruce, seeing what he looked like. So he immediately recognizes him, and Bruce just goes off running. He manages to outrun the military as he jumps from roof to roof across Brazil, but as he's going, he realizes his heart rate's going up, like he's got a watch that keeps track of his heart rate, and it's just starting to go up as it's going into 170, 150, etc., and so Bruce at least takes a second to start taking a breath, as he starts trying to do some breathing. As we saw earlier, we saw him learning some breathing exercises to try and control his muscle contractions, and which I think it makes sense, trying to control when he transforms and so forth. So Bruce tries taking a second, but he doesn't get a lot of time leeway as the military is still back on his ass as he keeps running. But in the chase, he runs into the jackass from the soda company, and immediately the guy starts wanting to start a fight with Bruce, especially since he's got his boys around. But Bruce is able to outmaneuver them enough and tries running away with them, with the military and these guys chasing after them as they run to the bottling plant. And they all run to the bottling plant. Bruce is able to get in, but unfortunately, Bruce and the military tries to keep it secret because they were told that they need to avoid direct engagement. They know that they said if he sees them, then they lose him. So they need to make sure that Bruce doesn't see them. But in the meantime, as Bruce runs in, this guy and his posse also go in and start hassling Bruce as they grab him. They start holding him down as they try beating him. But in the midst of the fight, Bruce drops the bag with his laptop in it. But they throw it out of range, so Bruce can't grab it. And Bruce tries to tell them, "Look, you need to go. Look, you don't want me angry." But the guy just keeps thinking that Bruce is just trying to intimidate him, saying, "Oh, you don't want me." It's like, "Oh, yeah, I won't like you when I'm angry. When you're angry, well, I'm very angry, and I'm out to kick. Well, I'm very angry." And so, Bruce keeps trying to do it, but the guy just keeps pushing him, kicking him, and eventually throws him to the ground. And it gets his heart rate to 200, and he transforms. We don't actually see him transform this time, but we see his eyes just turn green, and you see him. You see through the military as they're watching through binoculars, as you see him convulsing on the ground. And then as the creep tries to kick Bruce, suddenly something grabs him and then tosses him through a glass office right into a wall. And yeah, and for the majority of the scene, you don't get a clear look at the Hulk, but you see the other two guys start freaking out and running away as the Hulk chases after them. And I don't know what happens. I think they're either dead or unconscious, but they're taken care of by the Hulk, and the military realize they gotta go in there right now, or else they're gonna lose the target. And so they start trying to shoot at the Hulk, and it does jack. Like, everything they shoot at him, all the tranks, the bullets, everything just bounces off their skin, and all the Hulk is doing is just shrugging out their attacks, knocking and kicking them aside, and just throwing stuff. And like, he grabs a forklift and throws it right at them. He grabs a giant tank of dressing of soda and tosses it across the room. It's just a giant mess. And of course, Blonsky is seeing all this and wants to know what the heck this thing is. And eventually he does manage to get a good look at it. He sees this we actually see the Hulk's face, and but eventually manages to knock all the military aside enough for the Hulk to pretty much just get away. As such, later on we see the military recuperating at Bruce's apartment as they manage to grab the laptop from the from the factory, and they realize that Bruce has been communicating with someone in the United States via the encrypted frequency, and so they want to try and figure out exactly what the heck, and so they're going to try and use that to try and figure out what he's doing. But of course, Blonsky wants to know what the hell happened. As such, because he keeps telling him that he wasn't alone in there, something else is in there, and whatever it is, if it's connected to Banner, I'm going to find him and tell me what it is. And so General Ross says, it was Banner. And so, of course, Blonsky's like, what the hell was that? And while in the beginning, General Ross isn't exactly forthcoming, he does eventually tell him about the whole super soldier thing. As he tells him about how they were trying to create the super soldiers, how Bruce and his involvement in that with the Gamma and so forth. And so, as a result, and so he decides that he wants, and so he tries to, and he tells him that, and pretty much General Ross tells him why he wants the Hulk. In this version of the events, he's not after the Hulk because he thinks he's a monster that needs to be put down. In this case, in this continuity, Ross wants the Hulk because he thinks he's the biggest success that the Super Soldier program has yielded thus far. Because, as Bruce said, as General Ross said, they wanted to create a super soldier, someone strong who could just barrel through any enemies they come across, and it looks like the Hulk is that exemplified. He's like, just from the first time you saw him, he's strong, unstoppable, can throw heavy objects like a forklift or a giant tank full of soda like it was nothing. Like, this thing is the ultimate soldier. It seems like a success, and he wants it for him, and he wants it. That's why he's pursuing Bruce, because in his mind, Bruce is Bruce. The instant he got exposed to radiation, pretty much became the property of the government. And since Bruce is refusing to cooperate, he pretty much labeled him a fugitive, and that's why he's able to get all this stuff on him. However, Blonsky also says that if you were doing this, then maybe you have others. And so, Ross starts questioning about his career. Like, he asks him, how old are you? Like, 45 or something? Blonsky says he's like 35. He's like 39, but he's had plenty of experience back then. He's had plenty of experience since he started, and if he knew now what he knew, if he had the knowledge that he had now 10 years ago, he thought that that'd be someone he wouldn't want to mess with. And so Ross tells him, would you like that? And so Ross pretty much goes into deep freeze and pulls out essentially a variant of the super soldier serum. It's not exactly the same, I'm guessing, but it's enough so that they're able to it's enough to use it on someone. In this case, Blonsky. What they do is that they inject Blonsky with the super soldier serum in two phases. One's in the muscular structure to enhance his muscles, and the second is directly into his bone marrow so that his body can withstand the changes. Blonsky, of course, accepts, and so they strap him down and give him both the injections, and yeah, they actually say the bone marrow one hurts in the way they show it. They show it like it's being directly injected into his spine, and it's it made me cringe, admittedly, when I saw it. But as for Bruce, the next time we see him, he's transformed back to normal. He's not, except now he's in the jungle. Now he's in the jungle. I might have written it down. I might have written it down. Hold on. No, I didn't write it down. But he's pretty much just around. But he's just outside just outside Mexico, and so he manages to hitch a ride with a guy who gives him a ride to the nearest town. And so Bruce realizes that, and so after after begging for enough money to be able to at least buy him some decent clothes, because the ones he was wearing are shredded now, Bruce pretty much, I'm guessing at this point, Bruce realizes that if he wants to make progress now, that he wants to make any more progress, then he has to go back to the United States, which I think is fair enough. The military, he can't go back to Brazil. The military knows that his stuff is there. They might be still looking for him. So I'm guessing it's pretty much just while he's running, he might as well do this. As such, we see that over the course of like 2.5 weeks, he makes a trek from Mexico to Virginia, specifically to the place he was conducting his experiments, which looks like which looks like a university somewhere. And as he want and he wants to and he tries to get in, but unfortunately they have security there, and Bruce realizes that if he goes in there, he might be registered, and through that the government will be able to do that. Ross will be able to find him, so he decides that he needs to lay low. But something of note here is that one of the names that's in the of the people of faculty is Dr. Elizabeth Ross. Because that's his girlfriend, of course. But he doesn't do anything, and he doesn't try to talk to her. Instead, he goes to a pizza place called Stanley's Pizza, and Stanley is a friend of his and Betty's. I'm guessing when they were dating. And so Stanley lets Bruce stay in a bunker upstairs for the next stay in a room he has upstairs for the next few days. And Bruce manages to get Stanley's help in getting into the university by going in dressed as a pizza guy. As he goes in and goes up to the front desk, and yeah, it's a nice little fun fact. The guy that played the Hulk in the original live action show is there as the security guard, and so Bruce is able to bribe him into letting him go up by giving him a pizza. And so Bruce goes up there, and he gets to his old lab, and there is a guy working there, but thankfully he has 2 pizzas, so he's able to bribe him too. And so Bruce manages to use Betty's old login, which I'm guessing that he knew it from when they were dating, and she just never changed it. And he's able to log into the database of the university, and so he tries looking up anything that they have on gamma radiation and himself, because he needs to get that data to Mr. Blue. Unfortunately, though, it all seems to have been wiped clean. So no matter what he does, he realizes that what's going on is pretty much a dead end. As such, he decides that he needs to get out of there, because if this place doesn't have what he needs, then he shouldn't stay here long. So he goes back to Stanley's to pack his stuff, but while he's there, we see Betty, who is now hanging out with her new boyfriend, because Stanley said that she got a new boyfriend, and I guess fair enough. Bruce disappeared. Odds are she would still need to live her life. And so they're there, and Bruce decides that he can, and so as Bruce is leaving, he sees them talking and tries going out the back, but as he's leaving, Betty gets a look at him, and suddenly she just stops engaging with her boyfriend and just goes and then tries following Bruce, only to lose him in an alley. Of course, she then goes back to Stanley's and says, it's like, what is that? Who I thought it was? If I saw what I saw. Where did he go? But Stanley says that he doesn't know. But Betty knows that whatever happened to Bruce, he couldn't have gotten far, and so she manages to get into her car. I'm guessing her boyfriend left somewhere. I don't know where. I don't know. We don't see him for a little while. But she managed to get into her car and go down the street, and she manages to catch Bruce as he's going off. And the instant they see each other and face to face, they just start embracing and kissing, and they're just glad to see each other. As such, Betty brings Bruce back to her house, and it turns out that she has the data, that she managed to copy it down and get it all downloaded and get it all onto a flash drive before the government could come in and scrub the data. As such, Bruce uses this information. As such, Bruce with this laptop manages to. As such, Bruce now has the data and everything he needs, and so with this And so now that he has this, he realizes that he needs to get out of there because he needs to find a way to get this to Mr. Blue. However, as he's saying it, and so the next day he and Betty are at the university, and and he's saying his goodbyes, saying he can't, that he has to go, and while he has to go, and while he would like to stay, it's still too dangerous. But before he can go anywhere, he starts seeing military soldiers on the premises, and he realizes that they know he's here, and he has to get out of here. And yep, that's exactly what happens. As the instant Bruce starts running, they immediately start pursuing. And I think that then, honestly, I think if they're actually doing this, they probably should have cordoned off the area somewhat, like done it more secretively, like trying to get students off campus. But I guess that would have alerted Bruce. I don't know, but I still think they could have done better. But bottom line, Bruce realizes what they're doing and makes a run for it, telling Betty to just get out of there. But and so the military starts chasing him throughout the university, which is where we get to the trailer, where he's running through the library as they're trying to go after him. And in the pursuit, he takes the USB drive and kind of forces himself to swallow it, which yeah, it's a little gross to watch, but I suppose it's necessary, especially considering his own demeanor. But as he goes through, he runs into a skyway, and the military bolt him in. Betty, of course, did not take Bruce's warning and had stuck around, so she's watching all this. And so, as a tanker rolls up, Betty gets in front of it and yells out, "Stop!" And she knows that so she starts yelling, and her dad telling her, "I know you're in there. It's just to let him go. Yada yada. Get out of here, Dad." And at that point, Ross does step out of the vehicle and tries to get her inside, tries to usher her off. But as the military starts shooting gas grenades into the skyway, she starts freaking out and wants to go up there to get after him, but Ross keeps trying to hold him back, and Bruce gets his jacket off him and tries covering his mouth so that he can try and keep breathing and try and filter out the gas. But as he looks out of the skyway, he sees Betty being kind of manhandled here, and as the gas fills up, it manages to trigger him. And as such, we see his eyes turn green, and we actually get a really kick-ass scene as he transforms into the Hulk and then just busts out of the skyway, jumping right out onto the campus. And it's really cool to look at. It's really cool, even if the special effects aren't that great. That is a great reveal of the Hulk, and it is just so kick-ass. At this point, General Ross tells the soldiers to go in and go after him. And of course, the one up front is Blonsky, who is now running high with the serum. As the Hulk just goes in and just pretty much just starts wrecking everybody, and of course they keep trying to shoot him. Still does jack, but in the meantime, the Hulk is at this point just running towards Betty. But more military vehicles keep trying to get in his way, and eventually Blonsky gets in his way and manages to get to him. And we get the Hulk. You see the Hulk tear up a vehicle they were using and starting to use the pieces as like a sword and as like shields or bashers or or boxing gloves or whatever. And we actually see Blonsky as he keeps managing to outmaneuver the Hulk, actually keep a good pace and manage to keep the attention on him. As such, he manages to run away with the Hulk chasing after him, at which point they get these sonic devices out and just start blasting the Hulk, and the noise is enough to get the Hulk subdued enough. But as Betty's seeing this, she's just crying out for Bruce. She doesn't want him getting captured, and through all this yelling and through all the sound, the Hulk actually manages to hear her through all this, and it gives him enough of a determination to block one of the cannons with one of the large shrapnel pieces, and while he throws the other one directly at it, just destroying it. As such, he destroys the other one by either jumping on it or just cutting it in half with the other one. But as a result, he starts running to try and get Betty, and he does manage to get her, but he does eventually manage to get to her. But before that, Blonsky kind of went up to confront the Hulk, and Ross is telling him, get out of there, it's dangerous, but Blonsky pretty much just knocks it off, and we see Blonsky being a lot more confrontational as he tells the Hulk, come on, is that all you got, come on, and the Hulk's response is that he just drop kicks him right into a tree, and yeah, getting drop-kicked by the Hulk is gonna hurt a lot, because we later on see that he sustained a lot of injuries, and that we learn that he's red, he's bleeding. I'm guessing he's bleeding internally, and most of his bones are apparently sawdust. So yeah, did not go well. As such, after that goes south, Ross calls in some helicopters to try and shoot at the Hulk, but however, as this is going on, Betty actually does get to the I got that mixed up. Betty actually goes to the Hulk and manages to try and get a conversation with him, but that's when the military starts shooting at the Hulk, and the Hulk immediately shields Betty, and he manages to I don't remember how. I think maybe he grabs another piece of wreckage and throws out the helicopter, and it crashes down, but the Hulk manages to shield Betty with his body, and since he's mostly impervious to everything, he manages to save her, and they get away, with the Hulk carrying Betty off. After that, we later learn that the person that called the military was Betty's boyfriend. I don't know what his name is. I don't care. But the guy wound up running on a campus and all this is going down. So he saw the Hulk saving Betty, and so as Ross tries to get more information out of this guy, he pretty much tells Ross to suck it, as he says that it's like you're right to, as he says he protected her, he saved her. Wherever, I don't know where the heck they're going, but I'll tell you right now that wherever they're going, she's going to help him. And so pretty much he tells him that it pretty much means that he's not giving Ross anything else, and so Ross just walks off and wonders where the heck Betty met this guy. And in the meantime, we see that the Hulk and Betty are now hunkered down in a cave because it's starting to storm out, and so they need a place where they can be safe. And so Betty manages to wake up, and the Hulk is looking over her. She freaks out, and the Hulk ends up banging his head on the cave ceiling, which is a little amusing, especially when the Hulk just kind of goes like, ugh, like he has his hand on his hip and everything. But the Hulk, and while the Hulk, but then as we get thunder and lightning starts going off outside, Betty is able to calm the Hulk down enough by telling him it's just noise, nothing can hurt, and it's fine. And so she manages to bring him back inside the cave, and they just kind of sit alone. As such, the next day, Bruce has managed to calm down enough so that he's back to being Bruce. And so he and Betty go off to a hotel where Bruce, I think, either craps out or upchucks the USB drive. But as for... Sorry, I have to keep looking up his name. I don't remember his name that much. I remember what he's called, but I don't remember the guy's name. Blonsky. As for anyway, we're back with Blonsky. Like I said, when he got dropped out of the Hulk, it was not pretty. But as we see him in his cast, we see him start to move again and actually form a fist. And then later on, as Ross is being led by a soldier, he's asking, did he have any next of kin we can alert? And the soldier that's guiding him says, well, ask him yourself. And the next time we see Blonsky, he's perfectly fine. All of his stitches and casts are off. He's no more red. He seems to be just fine. And pretty much, and so it looks like that he's actually doing well. And so Ross asks him how he's doing, and he says he's pissed off and ready for round 3. And so, as such, they decide that they're going to inject him with more of that serum, which, yeah, is not a good idea. As such, back with Bruce, with him and Betty now on the loose, with him and Betty now kind of on the lam together, Bruce tells her what they can and can't use. Like, they can't use their credit cards, their cell phones, or any ID. All they can really use is like lip balm, cash, and all they can really use right now is the lip balm and the cash, and maybe some stuff here and there. But otherwise, like the ID and the credit cards and so forth, as long as they have that stuff, they are traceable. So they have to just kind of ditch it. And so Betty realizes that if they don't have, like, how far can they get to with just $40 in cash? Because that's all Betty had. Because right now they've escaped, because now they're on the lam together. They realize they need to find Mr. Blue. And from what we saw of the PO box that Bruce sent, when Bruce sent him his blood, he lives in New York. So they've got to get to New York. As such, Betty decides that she needs to sell a little diamond necklace that she's got. And Bruce thinks that no, that's the last thing you have. And Betty says, don't worry, we'll just get it back later. As such, they manage to sell it, and they manage to get enough money to buy a truck, which they use to manage to get to New York. And in the meantime, though, while they're doing all this, Bruce manages to send managed to get on a computer and send the name and send all the data that Betty had on the USB drive to Mr. Blue. However, this has ultimately turned out to be a bad decision, as thanks to the laptop that the government got from when they raided when they attacked Bruce in Brazil. The name Mr. Blue and Mr. Green are now in Shield databases, and so the instant Bruce sends the email to Mr. Blue, they actually the government actually managed to pick it up and finds out where the email is and directs it and manages to narrow it down to, looking it up again, to and they as we learn that Mr. Blue is a man as Dr. Samuel Stearns in New York. As such, Bruce and Betty managed to get to New York, and after a bit of turmoil with a taxi driver, they managed to finally find Dr. Stearns, who doesn't know where they are, but when Bruce calls him Mr. Blue, he realizes who Bruce is and what's going on. As such, they begin exchanging notes, and Dr. Stearns starts talking about how he wants to, and how maybe they could use a cure with the data and what he's compiled from his research. But even then, they have to be careful. Like, for starters, would it be an actual cure if they used it? And even if it was a good viable cure, they had to be careful with the dosage, because if they overshoot with their target point, they could make him so calm that they could kill him. Or if they go under it, then essentially the Hulk would just go nuts, As such, they realize that they need to actually test it out and get it all narrowed down. In the meantime, though, the military is getting ready to go after Bruce, because thanks to that email, they now know he's in New York. But we see a bit of Bronsky. Emil Bronsky. I'm sorry, his name is forgettable. I'm sorry. I'll talk about that later. As we see that Bronsky's kind of getting a little worse, so to speak, as we see him standing alone in a bathroom looking at himself in the mirror, and as the camera pans behind him, you can see his spine is starting to extend a bit from his back. Not enough to break skin, but enough so that it leaves an imprint where it is. And pretty much so you know that something's wrong with him right now. In the meantime, they decide back with Bruce, Betty, and Dr. Stearns, they managed to strap Bruce down and pretty much hook him into a machine where that can administer the cure into his bloodstream. And what they're going to do is that they want Bruce they're going to try and induce an episode, as it were, and then try and mix the cure in to see if it actually works in stopping the Hulk. As such, they strap Bruce in. They get him one of those rubber things that you put on someone's mouth so that they don't bite off their tongue. And so Stearns gets one of those little electrodes that they use for shock therapy, and just zaps Bruce, and the pain is enough so that it manages to starts transforming him into the Hulk. And of course, Dr. Stern is just kind of looking at this in awe, like, "Oh my God, this is amazing." But we see the Hulk is just, as the Hulk starts transforming, we see him start struggling, going nuts, and he actually manages to break one of his binds, but Betty manages to get on him and tries to keep him focused, like, "Bruce, look at me, it's me." And she manages to calm down enough to keep him from struggling too much, and so she tells Dr. Stearns to administer the cure, and they thankfully manage to get it into his bloodstream, and at first it actually seems to work. As once it's administered, the Hulk starts calming down, and he transforms back into Bruce without any more damage done. So it seems like it went well. In the meantime, though, the military is still closing in on Dr. Stern's lab, as Bronsky is getting closer and closer. But in the meantime, Bronsky is telling Bruce, and so Bronsky is saying that they're throwing a possibility of wonder if they either stop that one episode, like if they actually stop Bruce and if they cured Bruce completely, or if they just suppress that one episode. But then he starts talking about how when he tested this with other subjects, they didn't survive. And then Bruce stops and wait, what are you talking about? What other subjects? And then it turns out that Mr. Blue's been busy. It turns out that when Bruce sent Dr. Stearns the blood sample to test on, he thought that wasn't enough for him to work on, and he managed to duplicate it into multiple samples, giving it to live subjects like mice, like test mice, animals, and and it's implied that he may have used it on human subjects before. But the instant Bruce sees this, he's actually horrified. Like, Dr. Stearns is talking about how they can use this to pretty much like revolutionize it to be revolutionaries, win a Nobel, like they could cure disease, make everyone immune. Like with Bruce's blood, they could be like they could just be big guys, like they could be the big guys on campus. But Bruce tells them that he needs to destroy it, that this stuff is dangerous. And Bruce, of course, Dr. Stearns is like, well, what the hell are you talking about? Like this is a big break for us. We could do anything. And Bruce keeps telling him, no, they want to make a weapon. If they got their hands on all this, we would be screwed. But in the middle of that, a sniper managed to get a good shot on Bruce and hits him with a tranq dart. At that point, though, Bronsky breaks into the lab, and as he goes in, he knocks Betty aside, and so he goes to Bruce and he tries to revoke him, tries to get him to turn into the Hulk. And while his blood pressure and while his heart rate is going up, it goes down as Bruce falls unconscious from the tranquilizer. As such, the government now has Bruce and they're wheeling him out on a gurney. And Ross is there and he tells him, "If you took it away from me, I'm gonna put you into a hole I'm gonna throw you into a hole for the rest of your life." And of course, Betty is just disgusted with her dad, telling him that I'm never gonna forgive you what you did, and you can never speak, and I don't want you to never speak to me as your daughter again. But in the meantime, they left a soldier up with Dr. Stearns because if they actually did manage to cure the Hulk, then they're going to want those blood samples. They're going to want Bruce's blood samples, as they think if they can get all that, then they can maybe replicate the Hulk. They can maybe replicate the Hulk in some way. However, as Dr. Stearns has explained to the soldier that was guarding him, Bronsky knocks her out. As we see that things are not going well with Bronsky, as I'm guessing that when Bronsky took the serum earlier, whatever it was doing to him, it not only made him stronger and faster, but it's also affecting his mind. Again, we'll talk about that more when we get to Captain America. But in this case, pretty much the more he's gotten the serum and as he's confronted with the Hulk, he's kind of gotten a bigger lust for it as he wants more power, he wants more control, and when he looks at, and now that he's got a guy who has everything, that has all these samples from Bruce on his table, he says that he wants what Bruce has. He wants to be like the Hulk, which Dr. Stearns actually admits that he kind of seconds to a degree, because he saw when Bruce transformed and he thought it was magnificent, great. But as Bronsky is threatening him, Dr. Stearns realizes that something's already in him. Whatever the serum is, the serum is the serum, and he thinks that if they added the Hulk onto that, if they added whatever made Bruce into the Hulk, then the combination of the two would create, as he calls it, an abomination. But at this point, he's not really in a place to argue, as this is a super strong, super fast guy who can lift him up by his shirt collar, who can lift him up into the air just by his shirt collar, and even hold him in the air too. And so at this point, Dr. Stearns realizes that that he really has no choice. As such, he straps Bronsky onto another gurney, gets a sample of Bruce's blood into a machine, and begins injecting it into him. And then he replicates the experiment that Bruce was exposed to. Dousing him with gamma radiation. And yeah, it's exactly as Mr. Blue said it would. As the reaction is immediate, as you start seeing Bronsky start getting more muscly and stronger, as his clothes start ripping, you see him getting bigger. You start to see his spine start to literally jut out of his back. He just keeps getting bigger and bigger, and Dr. Stearns is trying to calm him down, saying, look, whatever we're doing, it's obviously gone wrong. You can just get on the table. And Bronsky's response is just to backhand him into his machine, which in turn causes the canister with Bruce's blood to start to drip and land onto a wound on Bronsky's head. Not on Bronsky's head, on Dr. Stearns' head, which starts to cause it to convulse. And I'll get back to that later, as the next time you see Bronsky, you see a group of soldiers outside the lab, when suddenly they see something break out of the lab and start just running out. And it's at this point that we see, and as they see it and they start pursuing it, and we see that the combination of the serum and the radiation have turned Bronsky into a whole other beast together, and yet, as Dr. Stearns calls him, he is now the Abomination, who, again, I was introduced to thanks to the Hulk Power Pack thing. Essentially, this big, grotesque monster that's just as strong as the Hulk, but just as powerful, but is completely and just as destructive, but is completely cognizant. Unfortunately, though, like what Dr. Stern said, he is not only an abomination in name, but also in function, as with his because he already had a lust for battle before this, and so adding on the Hulk and what the serum has been doing to him, he's now just a raving. He's now just going nuts as he jumps the street and just starts wrecking things, and we see people die. They don't beat around it. We actually see a woman get hit by a piece of debris. We see people in a taxi as he lifts it up and slams it onto a caravan of soldiers. And as this is going on, General Ross in his helicopter gets reports that the Hulk is going nuts, and which even Ross thinks is impossible because Bruce is right there. And so Ross and Bruce go to check it out, and they manage to get through a camera feed of the caravan, and they see just Bronski just going nuts throughout in New York or in Harlem as he just starts tearing the place apart, and he just screaming he wants a real fight. He just keeps tearing everything apart, and the last thing you see of him is him slamming the taxi cab on the caravan, and Bruce realizes that that's probably one of Ross's, and so they realize they need to find a way to stop it, that they can't, and Ross's response is that they should just send some guys in and take care of it, but Bruce says that if anyone has to stop Bronski, it has to be him. Which Betty at the first tries to talk him out of because they don't know if he will change, but at this point it's kind of moot. Like either at this point if he doesn't do it, then Bronski's just gonna keep going nuts anyway, so they gotta stop him. And so even Ross kind of seconds it to a degree as even if he could transform, because even if he could transform again, would he can't control the Hulk when he transforms. But Bruce thinks that at best he could aim it, which I think makes sense because at its heart the Hulk is essentially is like another side to Bruce. And it's based on his anger. Like when he first transformed in the beginning of the movie, he first attacked the guys. He first attacked the creep and his goons when they were harassing him. They were the ones that made him mad. And then when he went and transformed again, he went right to Betty, and he went right to Betty and was trying to get her away from the military, and that's because that's what got Bruce mad. So Bruce thinks that even if he can't control the Hulk, he can at least aim it towards the abomination. As such, General Ross reluctantly agrees, and so Bruce tells him to open the hatch, and so Bruce has to go out. Betty tries to talk him out of it, but he says he has to do this. They share a kiss, and he falls out of the helicopter, and he doesn't transform. Like as he's falling, he tries to get angry, but nothing happens, and as Bruce is falling, he kind of has an oh shit moment, which he actually does say. They bleep it out before he finishes the swear, and he creates like a small crater in the ground. But thankfully, he does manage to transform as the Hulk's fist breaks out from under there, and from the rubble we see the Hulk coming out as he rips off as what's left of Bruce's outfit is now just nothing but shred on him, plus pants. As such, the instant the Abomination sees the Hulk, he's just immediately like, yes, the Hulk, a real fight. And we just get a nice big clash as both of them just rush at each other and just start wailing on each other. And while it is but unfortunately, even with this extra thing, the Abomination is clearly a better match than the Hulk, as the Abomination keeps getting him into, as the Abomination managed to get a good as the Abomination manages to essentially clothesline him, they get into a fight. The Abomination starts tossing around to the point where the Hulk actually gets disoriented. But the Hulk actually gets a really cool scene where he grabs a police car, rips it in half, and then uses both halves of the car as boxing gloves as he rushes up and just starts beating the shit out of the Abomination till all that's left of the police car is an engine, and which he just throws away, and it's cool. But the Abomination, even after all that, is still like, even when he spits out a tooth, he's still raring to go. He's still trying his best to fight him off, and it's just so cool. And the fight ends up getting directed toward, and as they go through, they get blasted more into Harlan with the Hulk, I think, landing in an apartment with the Abomination going after, and Ross goes in to try and get a good. And Ross goes in and he tells his man to try and shoot at the Abomination, but the instant he does, the Abomination realizes that it's General Ross in there, so he tries to start attacking a helicopter, and the Hulk sees this, and knowing that Betty's on board, he starts trying to get him off there, trying to fend him off, actually getting into a nice little clash. But unfortunately, it's still not enough, as the added weight of both of these big monsters manages to bring the helicopter down, and it manages to bring the helicopter down. The Hulk manages to get up, but unfortunately, it looks like Betty and General Ross are still stuck on the helicopter, and unfortunately, it looks like it's leaking, and it looks like it's leaking fuel, and there's a spark from and looks like there's an active spark nearby. So the Hulk tries to go in and save them, only for the Abomination to come in and close and just hold him into a wall. And he actually telling him he doesn't deserve this power, and he actually manages to use some of his elbow, because again, he's so strong that his muscles are jutting out of him, and he actually manages to cut the Hulk's skin. But seeing Betty in danger, the Hulk manages to power through it, and he just manages to knock the Abomination off of him. And just as the spark lights the flame, and the helicopter's about to go up in flame, the Hulk does a giant sonic clap, and he puts out the flames. It's so cool. But the Abomination gets back up again and knocks the Hulk aside with this large chain with these two, I think a cinder block with these big cinder blocks attached to it. And so while Betty and General Ross are able to get out of the helicopter, the Abomination is getting ready to end them, and he says any last words, and we get the famous line as the Hulk gets up and says, "Hulk smash!" And he just slams his fist on the ground, and it causes a giant crack throughout, which actually manages to make the Abomination lose his footing enough so that when he shakes the chain in the air, he loses his grip on it, and it falls right back down on him and kind of ties him up, which the Hulk immediately takes advantage of by grabbing him, throwing him into an open courtyard of a building, and just using the chain to pretty much choke him until he eventually is subdued. They pretty much start choking him until he starts losing oxygen, and before the Hulk can kill him, Betty tells him, "No, don't." And so the instant the Hulk sees her, he lets up just enough so that he doesn't die, but at this point, the Abomination is finished. He falls unconscious, and the Hulk kicks his body over to General Ross, at which point the Hulk goes over to Betty, and he recognizes her, calls her by name, even wipes off a tear from her, but unfortunately, he can't still be with her, as a helicopter starts shining a light down on the Hulk, and he realizes that he's got to go. As such, he jumps off, and the film cuts ahead as we see Betty still in New York, as we see her looking at a picture she took of Bruce from when they were traveling, as the camera runs out of battery. And the film ends as we see Bruce now living in a cabin in the woods, as we see that he managed to get the necklace back, and he gets a letter ready to write, and he puts it in an envelope addressed to Betty. But the last thing we see of him is him just meditating in the cabin. This is as we hear his heart rate, and as we see the days that without incident, I think it was like 57. It suddenly goes down to 0 as he opens his eyes and they're green. But that's still not the end of it, as after that scene is over, we cut to General Ross as he's in a bar and just kind of downing drinks, constantly telling the bartender to give him to reload, and just give him more. But as he's doing it, someone walks in, and as I mentioned earlier in this video, that someone is in fact Tony Stark, played still by Robert Downey Jr. And yes, it is really good too, because I think aside from a mention of S.H.I.E.L.D., it looked like this film had nothing to do with the other one, and even then, the Hulk is a Marvel property. You could say that some form of S.H.I.E.L.D. exists in every movie that they make. But at this point, Robert Downey Jr. goes up to General Ross and just kind of rubs his face in the fact that the super soldier thing didn't work out, how he should have kept it on ice. And so General Ross pretty much and after an exchange, General Ross wants to know what the heck he's doing here, and Tony says, "Well, that's what I want to talk to you about, a problem you've had. You see, we're putting a team together," and he asks him what he's talking about, and that's the last thing we see in this film. So, yeah. But with all that out of the way, what did I think of the Incredible Hulk? It's all right. Yeah, that's my final judgment on this film. When I was younger, I thought this was a really good movie, and and what I liked about it back then, I still like about it now. But kind of looking at it now after all these years, it does have some problems. For starters, the most minor, the effects. This is, again, like I said, it's a very minor thing in this movie. But I don't think the effects are that great. They're kind of fakey, and the character models look a bit plastic. So whenever we see the Hulk, it doesn't look like it kind of looks like he's there, but it's very clearly but it still kind of looks a little off and weird. and it's just kind of weird. It kind of looks off, especially in comparison to later movies where the CGI is greatly improved on the character on the Hulk, and so kind of seeing him there, it's just kind of feels a bit. It just kind of looks a bit weird. Again, it doesn't look bad, and again, it's like I said, it's one of it's the weakest problem with this movie because it's the smallest problem with this movie, because while the effects are kind of cheap, they are well, not really. No, they're not cheap. They're not cheap. They're just not. It's just in comparison to later films, they're not that great. But while they may not be as great as, but while they may not be, they are kind of like that. They still look really nice. It is still cool seeing the Hulk and the Abomination in these settings. I think it's really nice. But I think a second problem is, again, kind of the villain. While Obadiah Stane was, and again, it's still kind of minor, but at the end of the day, the villain for this one is just kind of a soldier who wanted more. Now, to be fair, William Hurt does a great job playing the Abomination. As he plays, when we see the Abomination when he's Bronsky or Blonsky or whatever his name is, I'm sorry. We actually you do get the impression that he's a tough guy. He's a guy that he definitely is a hardened soldier and does his job. He's good at it. But the instant he gets the first super soldier injection, we start to see a change. He's still very militarized and still tactical, but you start to see something. You start to see the progression, and I do actually like the progression of his madness, so to speak. In the beginning, you see him running. In the beginning, he's very tactical and working in sync with his unit. But then, as he gets this next super soldier injection, you see him running ahead of everybody, getting a bit more impatient, going toe to toe with the Hulk. And then even when even confronting the Hulk even confronting the Hulk against orders, even though it leads to him breaking every single bone in his body. You start to see a change coming on him, and it's kind of not a good thing. And you realize that he's starting to get worse, especially after he gets the second super soldier serum injection, as you start to see him crave more, so to speak. You see him, the scene that you see him in the bathroom. You can definitely see it. You get a very uncomfortable vibe from that, and it looks really creepy, and just seeing that his spine just starting to begin to jut out of him. It was not a good idea to give him a second dose. So you're seeing it getting worse, and then when he goes to pursue the Hulk again, instead of actually wanting to capture him, he instead wants Bruce to transform so they can have a proper fight. It's actually you start to see the progression, and then when he actually wants Samuel Stern to transform into the Hulk, instead you kind of see it all come full circle as. With the way that Bruce had the gamma radiation, it gave him super strength, but it reduced brain activity. But it reduced kind of higher brain activity. Hence why the Hulk is dumber. But as a result, and it makes him more aggressive based on anger. As such, with a super soldier serum in there, his mind is still there, but already bringing on how the serum is starting to make him more power hungry and more violent and more everything. Combine that with the natural aggression that comes from having from being the Hulk, and it created an abomination, as both impulses combined into this monstrosity that wanted nothing more than to just destroy and fight, and it actually is a really good progression, and I like that at least. But at the end of the day, I think this probably is the smallest problem in comparison to the CGI. But even then, at the end of the day, it's a very big thing. At the end of the day, though, he is just a soldier who got power hungry. But again, it's still entertaining to watch. I would say he's actually a little bit more entertaining than Obadiah Stane, than in Iron Man. So it's still nice, and William Hurt is a good powerhouse actor. So okay, minor flaw. So that's kind of the minor flaw. But I think the two biggest problems this movie has is in its execution and its main character. Let's start with it, and I'll start with the execution first. And it's more about the film's tone, what it's going for. Going back to Iron Man. Iron Man was a film that, as I said last week, it felt like it wanted to be a fun superhero movie. We had the action, you got Tony Stark who's quipping, being arrogant, just kind of doing his own thing, and even when he gets back, he still kind of has that same demeanor and tone, or just kind of that same little, I'm cooler. It's like, hey, I'm cooler than ice. I can do what I want, kind of deal. Like you got that humor, or just when Tony, or just kind of, or like just had the nice little scenes, nice little cutaways. It had, and even when you had the nice cool action when Tony became Iron Man, it was really nice. It was cool seeing all that come together. That was like, that's kind of what it felt like. That film was actually trying to be a cool superhero movie. But then you have this film, and I think a problem with it is that it's that it doesn't feel like it. It's actually very melodramatic in some points, namely because like most of the film is just trying. It's just about Bruce as he's taking steps to try and not be tracked, but not be caught by the government, as we see him going the extra mile, like wiping away his blood, running away, doing encrypted messages as he tries to find research, trying to hail a cab, getting into technical talk, him breathing exercises, him running from the military, him trying to tactically get away from the military. It all feels very melodramatic, especially with stuff between Bruce and Betty. Like when Bruce and Betty first see each other, you see the longing, you see there, and again, it's not bad, I admit, but it feels very different than the last movie, where the last movie kind of felt like a superhero flick. Like, it actually did feel like it was trying to be a very fun superhero flick. This one feels like it's trying to be a sci-fi, it's trying to be a thriller, a spy thriller, where about a man who's trying to run away from the government because he has something that they want and they're willing to kill him to get it. And it kind of has that entire edge as he's trying to outmaneuver them and get away from him at every point he can, at every point. And again, fair enough. And again, it's a part of the Hulk's character. He's a drifter. He goes from place to place, and he goes from place to place while people that want him dead are trying to pursue him. Fair enough. But that plot is the main driving force of the movie. Bruce trying to outmaneuver the government as they keep trying to capture him and get the Hulk. And ironically, it kind of clashes a little when the Hulk actually shows up. Like, it doesn't make the Hulk scenes any less awesome. Like, when the Hulk appears, it's fun. It is so cool seeing this giant green monster tearing through things after this guy after transforming from this weak little guy who can barely defend himself. But it does feel like but that's just kind of the thing with it. As such, it kind of gets it just kind of feels like it's a different movie in that case. Like, it doesn't feel like it's trying to be a superhero movie in that regard. And it's, on top of that, it's not, and it especially helps because most scenes in this, there's not a lot of comedic scenes in this movie. It's a lot of melodrama, Bruce trying to keep it together, him trying to do all the technical stuff to try and figure out what's going on with him, him and Betty sharing romantic scenes. It's mostly just kind of a melodramatic. It's kind of melodramatic in that regard. I feel like it's a little bit more melodramatic than in Iron Man. And again, I'm not saying Iron Man was without drama. It had its drama. It had its characters with the dilemmas. But in this case, the big driving force is just Bruce trying to stay in the military, and him just doing his best to get off his back while trying to remain as calm as possible, knowing that the littlest thing could set him off. And again, I'm not saying that I want it to be like a comedy or anything. But at the very least, it kind of would be cool. It doesn't feel like it's a superhero movie. And again, it isn't a bad. But to the film's defense, it's not entirely without some merit and humor. Like, I think a scene that I just kind of found funny was a scene was when Bruce and Betty were at the motel. They have a moment and they just start, and as they're just there, they start getting closer, more intimate, and they start making out. And it starts getting more heated to the point where it goes in the bed, and they both start and it looks like they're about to lead to sex. But at this point, Betty's gotten Bruce a new heart rate monitor, and he knows that if his heart rate goes above 200, hits 200 or higher, he'll turn into the Hulk. And so as they get more heated, he starts getting more excited, and the heart rate monitor starts going up, at which point he realizes he's got to stop. He says, I got to stop, I can't do this. And Betty says, no, I want to do it. It's like, no, I want to, but I can't get too excited. And it's like, as it goes down, it's Bruce they both just kind of have, and then Bruce just suddenly just kind of bangs his head on just kind of lays his head on Betty's shoulder, and she just says, that's okay. And it's just kind of nice, because you realize that it's not Bruce trying to stay calm, it's Bruce admitting that he realizes he can't get it up. Like, if he realizes that if he tries too hard right now, he'll do something bad, which pretty much means that he's got I guess you could say Hulk impotence, because he just realizes that he can't have sex with this woman, and he wants it. He really does. And Betty just starts kind of like, no, it's okay, it's okay. It's the talk that women can sometimes have with men when they don't fail to perform in the bedroom, so to speak. And so, but since Bruce can't do it, it's actually kind of a little amusing. It's a nice little, it's just kind of amusing. And again, the film does have its few moments of humor, and while they can be good, it's again mostly melodramatic. I think another example of a good scene is when they're in New York. They decide they should get a cab because they think it'll be calmer than being on a subway. Turns out their taxi cab driver is a fucking maniac, and he just starts going all over the place, swerving all over, and as it's going along, Bruce's heart rate starts going up, and so they have to pull over, and Betty just starts yelling at the guy, telling him, "What the hell are you doing? You could have just killed us. What's wrong with you?" Yeah. And the guy tries to hit on her, and then she just gets in anger, and he just drives off. And as she's starting to calm down, Bruce says, I know some anger management techniques I think could really benefit you. And she tells him to just zip it. And Bruce is like, okay. It does have those moments of humor. It's just that the majority of it feels like a spy thriller. And it kind of gets to the point where the actual stuff with the Hulk feels a little intrusive. Hold on a second. Like when I'm sorry about that. Anyway, it's like when we actually get to the superhero stuff, it feels like it doesn't clash too much, but it feels like that both are kind of in their own realms, so to speak. Not enough to that but again, in the film's defense, sometimes when it doesn't clash too much, and admittedly, I feel it adds to the tension when the guy that's being pursued can easily transform into this monster if he gets too excited, which I think could add another bit of tension to that. So again, not as big an offense, so you can kind of live with it. But I think the biggest problem with this movie is Bruce Banner, and no offense to Edward Norton as an actor, but this Bruce Banner is bland. I mean it. He's bland. Like, going back to Iron Man, when you watch that film, Tony Stark has a clear character. He's an arrogant, rich guy who thinks he can do whatever the heck he wants, is brilliant enough to get away with it, and he's rich. He's rich. He talks down to people even when he doesn't mean to. He's very friendly and sociable even when he's being a dick. He's someone you can go out and party with, but at the same time, there's a heart underneath there, and when he actually sees people suffering, he wants to do something. And he kind of even has that same demeanor when trying to help people. It actually does feel like you have a definitive character for Tony. Compare that to Bruce Banner in this movie. Well, what do we know about Bruce? We know that Bruce is being hunted by the military. We know that Bruce is trying to cure himself of the Hulk. And we know that if he gets angry, too excited, he'll turn into the Hulk. What do we know about him personally? Like, what do we know about his personality? Nothing. Like, we don't know what his likes are, what his dislikes are, what he's like when he's in a regular conversation. Like, we know he and Betty are in a relationship, and they do have enough lovey-dovey moments that you can kind of get a good look, so that you can see they care about each other. But what attracted Betty to him? What about Bruce Banner pulls Betty to him? Like, what about him did she find attractive? What do we know about him personally? Nothing. We don't know about how Bruce is in a normal setting. We see him only briefly in a normal setting. See him just kind of eating, doing regular things, but Bruce as a character in this film is kind of bland. And that's kind of a problem. Like, we sympathize with him enough when we see him being pursued by the military, but not in a personal sense. It's just kind of a general sense. Like, if you were being chased by the military and turned into this big green monster, wouldn't you want to be running away? Don't you not want to be in that situation? That's kind of the same thing with Bruce. But it's the same with Bruce. But personality-wise, we don't know that much about him. We don't know if he's cool or dorky, or if he's chill or just kind of intimidating. If he's quick to anger, like if he gets scared easy. We know he's tactical. We know he's smart. But again, personality-wise, we don't know that much about Bruce in this movie. We don't know what he's like as a person. What he's like. And again, to be fair, the movie doesn't really put him in a lot of situations where he can be calm, so to speak. Because he's constantly on the move. He's constantly on up here because he knows that the military could be right there, could be right there in an instant. So he's got to constantly be in battle mode. So I can kind of understand. So you can kind of understand that. But then but as a result of that, Bruce Banner as a character suffers. We don't know much about him, and as a result, we can't really relate to him that much. And it's ultimately a big problem, and it ultimately becomes a problem. And it's a problem and I'm not going to say that Bruce Banner as a whole is bland. Like, later films do give you more to work with him. It's just that with this film, he doesn't... In this film, he just kind of... In this film, we get desperation, but that's general stuff. We see him being smart, okay. We see that he loves Betty, alright, fine, but why? And we see that when he gets angry, he turns into the Hulk. Alright, okay, that's a part of the character. But again, what do we know about Bruce personally? What are his likes? What are his dislikes? What is he like in a normal situation with everyday people? Is he neurotic? Is he laid back? Is he calm? Is he pushy? Is he too cool for... Is he kind of a jerk? Okay, I guess fair enough. We do know that he's not... Okay, fair enough. We do know a bit about him. We know he's a nice enough... we know he's a nice guy that he wants to... We know he's a nice enough guy, like when he was when he was in Brazil and that lady was being harassed by the creep. He went in and helped her. He went in and helped her while trying to avoid a confrontation. And when he saw the abomination wreaking havoc in New Harlem, he did willingly let himself be turned into the Hulk just so that he could have a chance of taking him down. We do know that we do know that he's a good enough person to want to do that. But again, beyond some general stuff, we don't know him as a character. And I think that kind of holds the movie back. We don't get too invested in Bruce because we only know the general stuff about him. He's really there to be the Hulk, and I think that's that's ultimately a big problem with the movie. But with that being said, what about this movie works? Well, I've kind of gone over it when I try talking about the flaws. Like, the sci-fi thrill, the acting, for the most part, is good. I do like it. Edward Norton, while he doesn't get much to work with, is a pretty decent actor. William Hurt, I think, does fantastic as Bronski / the Abomination, which I think is really good. And so when you actually see, while it may not be the greatest villain, I do like seeing the progression from just kind of a battle-hardened soldier to this giant monstrosity just wanting to fight. It's really cool. I like it. And the rest of the main cast, I think, is good. The actress that got to play Betty Ross, what was her name? Hold on a second. Liv Tyler, I think she does a good job, and I think Tim Roth as General Ross, I think he does a good job, and I think he's the only actor in these movies that actually comes back later in later films, so that shows kind of his talent. But and again, the story doesn't exactly feel like something you would watch in a superhero movie. It isn't bad. It's just that it isn't bad. It's paced rather well. It keeps the tension on. Because of the spy thriller vibe they're going for, it keeps it on edge and keeps you invested in what the heck's going on. Like even when Bruce isn't the Hulk, you want to keep following him around, seeing him being chased by all these soldiers, him just trying to stay in one piece. It's really good, and I think that helps the movie out, and I think that does a good job of helping the movie out in that regard. And again, I mentioned that I think the action is really dang good. It is fun to watch and see. Even when, the stuff, again, we get the tension of seeing him chase through, that's cool. And then when he actually becomes the Hulk, it is still fun to watch. Seeing him go nuts and go crazy, and it's actually really cool. And before I forget, how he gets his name as the Hulk. 2 teenagers happened to be going by while the military was attacking the Hulk. They filmed it, and then they got on the news and said he was like a Hulk, and that's how he got his name. So, yeah, that's a thing. Probably was kind of worth mentioning. I suppose another flaw I could think of is that because, again, I think another flaw could be like how the climax doesn't really fit with the story, how we see the villain kind of come up out of nowhere little by little. But again, I'm still willing to forgive it because you saw him progressively turning into this monster even before he underwent the transformation. So I guess you could. So I still think it was built up well, but again, still the story kind of clashes with the action a little because they both feel like they belong in different movies. They both feel like they belong in different movies somewhat. But with that being, but again, the story does keep you interested in what's going on. I think the main actors for what they have, I think they do well enough. I think they do well enough. William Hurt I think portrays his character really well, even if the villain is still just even if the villain is just kind of a soldier. But and I think and then on top of that we kind of get more, and on top of that we stew and yeah, I don't really know what else I can comment this movie for. Like, it does the pace. Well, that's again. Well, so I guess you can again, like I said, while the story doesn't feel like it fits for a superhero movie, it does keep you invested and keep and wants you and want and keep and wants and keeps you there enough so that you want to know what's going on. The effects, while not great, are still look kind of still looks cool. I love the action scenes. They're still really kick ass, and I think because it's the Hulk, it actually adds another layer of. I think it actually adds another layer to the whole action scenes because, like with Iron Man, while they could be bigger, and since you have this big hulking monster, you can be bigger, louder, stronger. It's actually really cool in that regard. The main acting is really nice. Just again, so yeah, on the whole, it's not bad. It's decent. It is. It's still. I think it is. Okay, I think it is entertaining enough, but I don't think it's great. It's got some. It's got the. It's got its flaws. Like it's got some flaws. Like the story feels like it shouldn't. Like the main character is kind of bland. The story, while does keep you invested, doesn't feel like it should be in the movie. It doesn't feel like this is a movie it should be for. And the villain, admittedly, could be a bit. And the villain could admittedly be. And you could say the villain doesn't make a lot of. Doesn't shouldn't be here. No, I'm just gonna scratch that. The villain I think is okay, not great, but he's not a great villain. But William Hurt saves it, and so yeah, main character is bland. Story doesn't feel like it should be there. Those are and they're present throughout the whole movie, and yeah, not big problems, but they're enough to hamper it. They're enough to hamper the movie. So at the end of the day, I think the film is decent. Not great, but decent. So, but let's talk about the future. Namely, what this film meant when what this film did. I feel like like going back to some things. Like there are two things in this film that I want to talk about when in trying to set a future plots. The first is Tony Stark, and the second is Mr. Blue. Like for Tony Stark, his appearance confirmed that they were going to be made that this movie was set in the same universe as Iron Man, which I think really helped add the tension and kind of which did kind of help make you feel excited because even if the film was just decent, it would still make you invested enough to want to see more of what happens after. But there's also a matter of aborted arcs. I think they were planning on doing more with the Hulk, but I think two things stopped them. The first thing being that this film, being the response the film got, which again was kind of what I had, that people liked it but they didn't love it, like they did with Iron Man, and Edward Norton backing out. Like Edward Norton backed out because after this film, Edward Norton didn't want to be the Hulk anymore. He didn't want to be typecast, which admittedly you can kind of say maybe it'd been a good decision because it led to Mark Ruffalo, and I think he does really well too. But I think if you had given Edward, and admittedly I think you could have given Edward Norton time. I didn't think he was bad. I just thought that his Bruce Banner was bland. Which, yeah. But as a result of this being the only film the Hulk had that he's a standalone, certain arcs were introduced and then just forgotten. One such arc being Mr. Blue, aka Samuel Stearns. For those not in the know, Samuel Stearns in the comics is a Hulk villain, specifically a villain called the Leader. He is a guy that got exposed to the gamma radiation that turned Bruce Banner into the Hulk. But whereas the Hulk gets dumb but super strong, the Leader got super intelligent. he has a large brain that his head is actually his head is a that makes his head get bigger, and that's what that the drop of blood on Dr. Stearns in the lab was supposed to do. It was supposed to hint at him becoming a leader. Unfortunately, because this is the only standalone Hulk movie, that has never been followed up on in any other Marvel movie, and it's kind of a nitpick, it's kind of a nitpick, admittedly. I feel like that should have been a bigger deal. Like, I kind of like that's just kind of my thing. Like, when I see an arc and then it's just forgotten about, it does kind of get under my skin a little. They did that with Ben 10 with permanent retirement, but the fact, like, you even see him smile evilly, like as his head's starting to start bulging and getting bigger. You see him smile as you see him being turned into a leader. But nothing ever comes of this. Nothing ever comes of this. He never comes back after this movie, which I think is a little annoying. Because I can't, and that's never been followed up on again. And it's a side effect of the Hulk. This being the only Hulk film that the Hulk got, I suppose. So I don't know. I just wanted to talk about that at least. I probably should have mentioned that in the flaws. But yeah, I think that's all I can say. I think I've beaten a dead horse enough. The movie's decent, not great, but worth it. But worth enough. But I don't regret seeing it. So yeah, that's all I gotta say. Thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and tune in next week as we look at the first official sequel in these movies, as we see the second film in the Iron Man trilogy with, well, Iron Man 2. So, take care, and I'll see you then.